What have you found out about a partner, potential partner that immediately made you ghost? He wasn't allowed to work with children. Immediate ghost. Referring to women as sluts because they like sex, bad vibes. Googled him before our first date. He'd recently been convicted, and given a suspended prison sentence, for revenge porn of his ex-girlfriend. The pictures were from when they were underage. I was seeing this guy in college and one day, he brought up his disgust with women's periods. Not just the bleeding, but the symptoms that came with it. He said that women calling out sick because of menstrual cramps was utter BS and we should just suck it up. My friend has endometriosis and suffers from extremely heavy periods and chronic pain. I had extremely heavy periods which was a result of a hormone imbalance and was later diagnosed as anemic. I did not see him again after that conversation, but I let him know that he was way out of line. Found out he beat the shit out of his mother. He had a wife and children. Found out after a month of dating. He wanted to do just the tip without a condom, when I had clearly stated I wasn't doing anything without a condom. Threw him out and blocked his number. As soon as we sat down for dinner, he says, "So actually I just got out of jail today. Crazy shit. I have a bit of temper. I hightailed it out of there pretty quick." Googled his name and found out he had recently been in prison and had pending felony charges for planting a homemade bomb underneath the car of a man his ex-wife had been seeing. A morning text, "I need to F.K." inspired me to peace out. Met with a play partner, I'm into BDSM, who despite knowing my hard limit was being insulted, proceeded to insult me and my blowjob skills the entire time we were engaged in play. He also did not know basic hygiene. He used the same hand that touched my butthole to touch my crotch. When confronted, he said it's because he's too excited. I told him in no uncertain terms we weren't going to play ever again and advised him to learn more about BDSM and hygiene to avoid doing this to future partners. Next day, he texts me and asks for a blowjob. I blocked him straight away. His ex called asking where he was. Turns out he'd arranged with her to see his kids that day. But instead he told her he couldn't make it, because he was at my house. I had only known him a couple of weeks. I made up an excuse to make him leave shortly after that call, and completely ghosted. I have no respect for a man who shits on his children and ex and commitments that he made. Displayed extreme hatred towards gay and trans people, and sex workers. I have zero tolerance for this. Before I met my boyfriend on a dating site, one of the guys I never got around to meeting for reasons that will unfold here. I was talking to was hyper-focused on whether I was naked at any given time. I let that red flag go because I thought maybe he was just awkward and inexperienced with dating. But I did tell him his focus on my state of undress all the time was making me uncomfortable. So instead, knowing that I had dogs, he just started asking me about my dogs all the time. It was pretty innocuous at first. "What are your dogs doing now? Did they get any treats today? Did you play with them today? Do you like to cuddle your dogs to relax?" Well, I do like to cuddle my dogs, so I didn't really see any issue. But then he started back up with the semi-sexual talk. But kept the dogs involved. "Do you cuddle your dogs naked? Would you cuddle your dogs naked? And worse." Nope. I don't believe in ghosting people as a general practice, unless it's clear someone is a creep and might be a danger. This guy had me very creeped out. He asked me a very inappropriate question about my dogs one day and I never responded to him again. Eventually, he got the message and stopped contacting me. He, unannounced, brought his 3-year-old with him and tried to force interaction between us. Later tried to initiate sex whilst the kid was sleeping in the room. He was TikTok famous, I'm not on there, and was cancelled for homophobic and creepy child-related jokes. I found out when my mother Googled him and sent me a video of him, saying, "Is this really who you want to be associated with?" He wanted me to put him in diapers and said he was falling in love with me. On the second date. Officially Caspered. Had a date booked with a guy from an app. Day of I stalked his social media and saw a recent post where he had screenshotted a lady's dating profile from the app and posted it laughing about her body to his friends. Stood him up and got loads of whiny messages but F*K him. So I've been talking to this older guy. He brags about his money a lot. Typically people who actually have money don't tend to brag. Because the money isn't actually his. I thought it was weird. We went out and have been talking for a few weeks. I looked him up on Google and it turns out he was indicted with sales of false certificates to the underprivileged. It's a huge case. I don't want to go into detail because I'm afraid of what he could do. I'm definitely ghosting. But he is deranged and a piece of shit. Edit to add another story. My most recent 2YRSLTRLDR, he was 32. Our interactions were becoming increasingly tumultuous, toxic, very unreasonable. Mansplainer, man-child behavior and incel behavior. I literally took his virginity at 30. Inside I feel validated for ghosting BC. He was straight up disrespectful most of the time. So he had very recently moved back in with his parents, after living with roommates for a few years. It was about 3 weeks in living with them he expressed to me that he was hungry. I suggested to him maybe he should go grab a bite or go grocery shopping etc. He replies, verbatim, "Mom buys the groceries." I was talking to a guy on a dating site and he just started giving me creepy vibes. He wanted to know all about me, but when I asked him anything about himself he clammed up. When I stopped talking to him he would just send me selfies of himself smiling, but it was a creepy smile. No message, just a selfie. I can't explain it, but I always got a bad feeling about him. I was talking with my boyfriend at the time, who constantly pressured me into gaining weight for him. BC he had a fat fetish and I was quite skinny when we started dating. And he kept his fetish secret for the first months. And he suddenly said that he constantly fantasizes about breaking up so he can eat whenever he wants. I cooked what he wanted for him and am a solid cook and he liked what I made for him. But he felt inconvenienced by having to come to the dinner table when I had dinner ready. And so he can go on Tinder and look for fat girls. Clown face. When I reacted hurt he started gaslighting me that I can't punish him for just being honest. Edit. Admittedly I didn't permanently ghost him after this. BC I was used to a lot of his bullshit. But that was definitely the point. I finally realized he's a piece of shit. And that was the beginning of the end at least. Edit 2. Another fun story was when he told me that he was scared to lose his last good years to me when he might find a fat woman in that time with whom he actually want to spend the rest of his life. Another one. We were kissing in his car after our first date. He put his hand between my legs. I gently removed it, all while keeping lip locked. A minute later, his hand wanders back. I removed it again. I'm not ready for that yet. When he put his hand back a third time, I said, "Dude, what the hell?" He shrugged. It's a woman's prerogative to put down boundaries, but it's a man's prerogative to push them. There was no second date. They voted for Trump and loved Rush Limbaugh. Automatic deal breakers for me. Felt bad, so my ex tried to cheer me up by asking stuff about my major, which usually gets me talking for a good 2 hours. I study the ancient Middle East. So where did the first people come from? Huh? Africa isn't in our curriculum and we don't go that far back. That's biology more than history. Africa? No, I mean Adam and Eve. Where did they live? Adam and Eve? Oh my god, you're an evolutionist? Didn't talk about religion much beforehand, and we live in Western Europe, so I stupidly assumed he'd be moderately religious at absolute most. He was so stuck in his own bubble that he couldn't fathom me not being religious. Despite me telling from the get-go I'm an atheist, he apparently didn't think that included God isn't real and creationism is bull. He told me about his sister. He was really close to her and she had a special nickname for him, and he was missing her because she moved out of state. Then he asked me to have phone sex with him and role-play as his sister and use the nickname and say things like, "When will mom be home? What if mom sees us?" Those red flags were like the flappy tube men outside of car dealerships. Bye-bye incest man. Neither a partner let alone a potential. Thank God Almighty. I knew this guy from school. We shared several of the same classes. He seemed so friendly above the surface. But I discovered that he was far from nice. First of all, he divorced his first wife by ghosting her. Secondly, he was and still is a raging misogynist, as in women must do what I say straight away and can never question me, and they are all gold diggers level of misogynist. And finally, he was and still is a rape denier, apologist and victim blamer. I hate ghosting on every level and advocate communication as much as possible. But in this case my safety comes first, mental, personal as well as physical. I feel like he was so unbelievably sick, twisted, fake, delusional and evil that the above reasons made me feel perfectly vindicated to do this without feeling any guilt whatsoever. I was talking to a real handsome dude and was slowly about to get serious until he told me he fucked dogs. But don't worry, I'm not gay, like WTF. He thought him being a zoophile was more acceptable than being gay? Haha, when he told me he fucked dogs, he had a male beagle. I said, so you fuck your dog? He told me only females, because he wasn't gay. Weird rationale. Went on a date with a guy and he was super nice. Said all the right things, charming. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something seemed really off about the whole thing. I mean, my spidey senses were absolutely screaming, so I cut the date short and Googled him the same night when I got home. Turns out he had been arrested. Not once but 3 separate times for domestic violence. Immediately blocked him. Found out later through a coworker that knew him that all 3 of those arrests were with different women, and apparently he had put his hands on other women too, but was never arrested for it or anything. She told me I dodged a hell of a bullet, and clearly I did. I've never felt more validated about listening to my instincts. NSFW, but he said he wouldn't ever perform oral, or use his hands during sex, and that I couldn't masturbate. Ghosted him because if I continued a relationship with him, I'd risk dying without ever having an orgasm again. Lol. Edit to add, he said, if you can't come from penetration then you need to work on that. He was anti-vax to the point where it affected his ability to get a job. So he's living at his parents' house, doing nothing with his life. He also has ambitions to become a rapper. I've heard his tracks. They're not good. So I was dating this 28-yo when I was 17, and one evening on a date he noticed my self-harm scars and asked me about them. I got really upset and he wanted me to go back to his place to stay the night because he was worried about me, but we didn't have to do anything. Anyway, that turned into him pressuring me into having sex even though I kept saying I wasn't up for it. I didn't realize anything was wrong, but I just ghosted him for the next week until he sent increasingly desperate text messages and I let him know I didn't want to see him anymore. Still didn't know why, but something felt wrong. Realized what happened like 6 months later. No reasonable 28-year-old would date a 17-year-old child. And I wouldn't call it dating. He kept talking how he could date like every woman he wanted to, how beautiful and nice his female friends were, and he asked me why I didn't wear designer clothes to our date. I mean, it's not a found-out trait, he was just an idiot. After a few months of casual dating, I went to his place. He had one plastic chair in front of the TV, mattress on the floor, clothes in clean, dirty piles in front of the washer, and what must have been thousands of empty plastic bags on the floor. He was a high-level government employee, with high salary, who had lived there for years. I had overlooked the micro-dick, but the way he lived was an instant nope, we're done. Called Obama the N-word while cooking dinner for me on a stay-in date. I stood up and said I couldn't be with someone who thought that was okay. Never spoke to her again.